Welcome to the Face of Innovation. I'm Dave Byron. Who could have imagined that you could have had a little bit of sun in your pocket? You know, you could reach in your pocket, you could take it out, and you could bask in all those wonderful, enriching rays of the sun, and yet not have any of the harmful effects. Well, what began as therapy for winter blues, or what some of you may know as SAD, has seasonal affective disorder, has now expanded to therapies for jet lag, shift work, fatigue management, sleep disorders. Our guest today is embarking on a journey. He's a mission, if you will, to prove that the science of why light therapy makes you feel better, and to educate the population about the benefits of light therapy to wellness. After launching his business in 1999, he now has customers in over 29 countries, including Canada, Sweden, Finland, Norway, the Netherlands, and the United States. He's bringing his patent-pending technology to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Larry Pederson, the founder, president, and CEO of the Litebook Company. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
Larry was, by the way, born in Medicine Hat, Alberta. In '83, he moved to California to attend film school and received a Bachelor of Arts degree at University of Southern California, then becoming a screenwriter and a film producer. Larry, you found yourself coming back to Alberta after some time and leaving sunny California. How did that all evolve?
Well, I was diagnosed with, finally in '94, in November of '94, after my father passed away, I was diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder, winter blues, and I was given the option of taking antidepressant medication, Prozac, which held no interest for me at all, and the alternative was to try light therapy, which 10 years ago I was a complete skeptic about the whole concept, but I was so desperate because my mood and my energy and everything had gotten so low by this point, and being home and being in Canada in the wintertime for a period of 3 or 4 months as the days got shorter and shorter, that I wasn't able to perform, I wasn't able to focus, I wasn't able to do anything. So I accepted the option of trying light therapy just sort of as a last resort.
So help us understand the innovation and how it works.
Well, existing light therapy technology, which has been around for about 20 years, has always been based on fluorescent light. The first light therapy device weighed 79 pounds. It was 8 4-foot fluorescent tubes in a metal housing that you had to sit in front of for 2 hours every morning in order to get the benefit. The one I was using was weighed about 10 pounds. It was fluorescent tubes about 18 inches, looked like an oversized desk lamp. It was big and it was heavy and it was clunky. And so it was very unattractive, and you had to sit in front of it for half an hour, which, you know, that being said, it did work. And when you sat in front of this light for half an hour, you could feel something literally sort of receding out of your body, your energy coming back, your mood coming back, and I felt at least like I was back in Southern California. So I ended up becoming a sort of a regional distributor for the manufacturers of this device from Montreal, and was selling this product every winter in Canada. I ended up staying in Canada. My original goal had been to go back to California, but life intervened, so to speak, and I ended up in a relationship and had a child and so on, so I ended up staying in Canada, and now I look back on it almost as if it was predetermined for me to do that. So I used this light every winter, and I sold this light every winter, and every winter more and more people responded to the concept of, boy, I need one of those, or my wife, or whatever, and so but they all complained, as I did, about the fact that it was big and it was heavy and it was awkward, and if you had to take it from one place to another, it was in the winter and it was cold and it was inconvenient and so on. But mostly for me, there's a real stigma associated with the concept of seasonal depression because, again, it's a form of depression. And I frankly got tired of people coming in my house and saying, God, what is that thing? Like, what is so wrong with you that you need to have this really ugly light sitting on your breakfast table? And so I often wouldn't use it. And so I began thinking there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something that sort of reflects who I am, not how I feel, as one of my customers said. And I looked on the internet and everywhere I could and never found anything. And then I thought, well, you know, maybe I should just do it myself.
So, and you have You have one here that you can...
The design criteria was I wanted to fit in my hand, I wanted to fit in my briefcase, and I wanted to look like Sony built it. Because, again, to take the stigma away. So this is what it ended up looking like. And this is the Litebook, and I'll turn it on here. We can talk about the technology in a minute. But so you can see now it's a very bright light, and it does replicate sunlight. That's what's really interesting. We can talk about that. But the way that this light impacts on the body is almost fortuitous.
Yeah, and as I understand it, one of your initial challenges was this whole idea of, making it smaller, more compact. How did you sort of tackle that?
When I had this idea, I realized very shortly after I had the idea, and the idea came to me almost sort of fully formed in terms of what I saw. But I also realized I was not an engineer, I was not a designer, I was not, I hadn't started a business before, I hadn't done any of those things. So the limitations on my own abilities were pretty evident to me. So I tried to find people that had expertise in the areas that I needed. And the first people were the engineers and the designers. And so they began looking at finding a compact fluorescent light, because in 1999 that's pretty much all there was. And they were able to find a light source that got it down to about the size of a laptop.
Yeah.
Or a notebook.
How did you find those people? That's an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, I had this idea to do this product, and I went to see a guy who ran the economic development department at the city of Medicine Hat, who was a friend of mine. And he said, yeah, this is a good idea. You should talk to Terry Meininger. He works at the Suffield Research Facility, the Defense Research Establishment Suffield, which is a federal research base near Medicine Hat. But he then introduced me to the brain trust, if you will, of experts and designers and engineers at this research facility who had their named inventors on patents for infrared suppression systems for battleships and so on. And they then began tinkering with this almost sort of as a fun project to do on the weekends and at night, where they would try and find this light technology that they could then use to shrink the product down. And at the same time as they were doing that, I began looking at what other applications there was, what other market there was for light therapy, because I realized SAD, winter blues, is a big market, and now we know more about it. It's actually 25% of the population in North America. But I discovered another application, which was jet lag, as you said in your introduction. That there's a way to shift the human body clock with light that was based on research done at NASA with the astronauts for the shuttle program. But I began talking to business travelers, friends of mine who worked for Fortune 500 companies that were road warriors that lived on the airplanes and whatever, and they all said, yes, jet lag is a killer, but I can't carry something. Something that's the size of a notebook is too big. It's got to be small enough to fit them. I got a briefcase, I got a laptop bag, and I got a carry-on bag. If it'll fit in one of those three, I'm interested. Otherwise, I'm not. So these guys had toiled, tirelessly to find the smallest, most compact light technology they could, but it was still too big. And the next smaller technology was halogen, which, as you know, is very small and very compact and very bright, but it's also very hot, it's very fragile, it's very expensive, and very short life, all of which is bad. You never get it on an airplane. So that led to basically a dead end, which was in basically September of '99. In September of '99, we basically decided there was no other light technology available. We've exhausted all the opportunities for light, and therefore either you build something that's this big or you don't build it at all.
Yeah, challenging time.
Yeah, and I at that time was very frustrated because I thought, no, this idea is too big, it's too real, there's too much life in it, is how I felt. It's not over yet. And about 2 or 3 weeks went by until I got a phone call from one of these guys at the base, from Hank Hudema. And I was sitting at home, and I was sort of in one of those low ebbs where you think, well, boy, maybe this is over. Maybe that's it. Maybe it is over, And the phone rang, and it was Hank, and he said, have you ever heard of a white light-emitting diode? And I said, I barely heard of a light-emitting diode, never mind a white one. What is it? So then he went on to describe the concept of light-emitting diode technology, which has been around for about 20 years. The red LEDs that you see in the cameras and the mics and your VCR remote at home and everything had been there forever, and they'd been able to make green, and they've been able to make amber, and they've been able to cluster them and put them into traffic signals and taillights and so on, but they'd never been able to make white. And this one chemist at this one company, Nichiya in Japan, that makes other LEDs, discovered almost by accident that by taking a blue LED, which by that point they had, and adding a yellow phosphor to it, he could make it glow white. And it was one of those sort of eureka sort of moments.
And didn't you tell us a little bit about the prototype and Actually, I love this wonderful story about the first time the prototype and bringing the people in the room and showing them what would eventually become this.
Right. Well, we got a sample of 9 LEDs. That's all they would send us. And so we had 9 sent over by FedEx, and we built up this power supply and hooked them up to a power supply. I hadn't even seen them. And I had gone to see our MLA in Medicine Hat, and he got on the phone to the Alberta Research Council, who then quickly referred us to the NRC. So they sent 2 guys down to come and see what we had, so we put all these people who had been working on this company, this concept, which wasn't even a company, we hadn't even incorporated, but there was the guys from the base, and there was a lawyer and an accountant and a computer guy, and etc. And we put them all into a room with the NRC guys, and we had these 9 LEDs, and we turned off the lights and powered up these LEDs, and this little 9 LEDs, which you can see, they're about each the size of a pencil eraser, 9 of them lit up a cone of light on the ceiling in this boardroom. And we all sort of went and looked over, and it was sort of one of those eureka, oh my God sort of moments. And it really was sort of the beginning of the story, if you will, or the beginning of the Litebook Company. And so very shortly thereafter, we initiated the process, we formed the company, and we launched the Litebook Company.
And how did you raise the money that you needed? I guess now you've got a prototype, but now you need to raise the kind of money to work and
Sure.
bring this forward?
Yeah, we built a prototype. The first prototype we had was just a wooden frame around a PC board with 120 LEDs because we weren't sure how many we needed. And then we went out through, one of the things about, friends and families, they say, is always your first set of investors, and that was no different for us. And in Medicine Hat, the good news about Medicine Hat is it's a small population, 50,000 people, and very interconnected, and so everybody pretty much knows everybody. And we were able to set up investor meetings where we went in, and I just took this, like a picture frame basically, with 120 LEDs and just shone it in their eyes and said, this is the future. And they all said, okay, I'll invest if you turn that light off. And many of them did, and they were willing to take a flyer. I mean, at that point, there was we had some rough numbers of what the market was and what the opportunity was, but really it was, I think a lot of it came down to my own conviction and belief in what we had, and the fact that I was living proof, because I began using this. I was the guinea pig. I was the only person in this endeavor that had SAD. And at this point it was November, December, so it was the darkest days of winter. And what was interesting is I began using the prototype of these 120 LEDs, and I found that even though with the light meter it was only half as bright, my treatment time was half as long. So I was using the big one for half an hour every morning, and I began using this one, which was half as bright, and my treatment time was 15 minutes, which didn't square. If it was half as bright, it should have taken twice as long. So we were all sort of scratching our heads about that, and only later did we discover that, again, serendipitously, the key wavelength for suppressing melatonin and elevating serotonin, which is the action that you want to improve your mood, improve your energy, and so forth, happens to be identical to the wavelength of the LED.
Interesting. Who is Dr. Lam, and what role did he play in the next stage of your development?
Dr. Raymond Lam runs the mood disorders clinic at UBC in Vancouver. He's a professor of psychiatry and a noted psychiatrist, and one of the top researchers in the world on SAD. So I called him up in the summer of '99 before we had the LEDs, and I told him that I had SAD, I was using this big light, we were developing a new one. Would he look at a prototype when we had one? He said, sure, bring it out. So when we had the first prototype of this, I went out to Vancouver and I showed it to him. And he was kind enough to see me, and he looked at it, and his first words were, this is going to change everything. So I asked Dr. Lam to sit on our professional advisory board. And he was the first member of that board because I wanted somebody who knew how to guide us, because we still had so many questions, so many things we didn't know. Dr. Lam was kind enough to consent to that, and he has been invaluable as we've gone along.
He still plays a very active role.
Yeah, very active role, yeah.
And isn't it true that at some point or another he actually got you connected up with the Psychiatric Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and then I guess Stockholm issue of moving out into other markets?
Well, the first thing he said to me is that he said, get this in the hands of the researchers. He said, you know, this is so different. This is such an innovation in terms of the light therapy, the technology, and so forth, that you need to get this in the hands of the people that actually will be prescribing it for their patients and that are doing the research, both. So we went to the American Psychiatric Association meeting in New Orleans that year. Dr. Lam was there. We had a booth. It was one of our first trade shows. It was really interesting. There was 15,000 psychiatrists from 44 countries for 4 days. But Dr. Lam also suggested that we go to a conference that was the World Research Organization for Light Therapy, which that year was being held in Stockholm on the summer solstice, interestingly. So we went and we had a display, and we had all the people in the world, there's about 150, 200 people there, who were leading the way, if you will, leading the leading lights of light therapy, who were the people that had up to that point been using the big fluorescent light boxes because that's all there was. And suddenly they found that there was another way. At the APA, at the psychiatry meeting in May of 2001, we were taking orders for the product from doctors who wanted to buy it right here, right now, and we actually didn't have them we only had one, and we were putting
minor factor.
It was a detail that, you know, these, I mean, and for me, again, someone who, I mean, my background in the film business helped me in some ways because of the need to be able to look at production schedules and that sort of thing. But the concept of manufacturing, I was completely naive about the issues involved in that whole process, which is, it's one thing to come up with an idea, it's another thing to actually take it into the market.
So how did you actually fulfill the orders? You come back and...
We had already commissioned a mold to be built, and we had the first ones sort of hot off the press, and that's the ones that we had at the trade show. And we had people literally putting them together in their basements, housewives and so on, that were putting together the first batch of 1,000 that we built, and discovering that this doesn't fit and that doesn't work, and what about this, and how about that, and how do I do this? And we eventually did fill them, and it wasn't that the time lag wasn't too bad, and the response was very positive, which of course generated more orders. So.
Oh yes, continue. I'm wondering, Larry, what was your strategy for entering the market, and how, you know, what are the challenges in sort of entering the market?
It was considered a medical device, so people that wanted a light device would go to a place that was selling the, you know, things like wheelchairs and that kind of thing, home health care stuff. So we put it into the place where the existing products were being sold, and we found that there was quite a response to that. But we also realized that there were other channels where we were trying to get to our customer. Identifying our customer was a really big issue. Who are the people that are using our product? Where do we find them? Because those people don't necessarily go to where these lights are available. So we had to sort of work backwards from where would people find them and where would people be likely to buy them. So we looked also at sort of health food stores, that kind of thing, as well as sort of independent pharmacies.
You're now, you know, selling in 29 countries. How did you sort of tackle that in particular to get the international exposure to?
Well, one of the things, going to these international trade shows, certainly there was a big trade show in Atlanta and another big trade show in Germany, the Medica trade show, that we would attend there. We would find people who wanted to be a distributor for our product in a country. So we would qualify them and then go, in many cases, to the country, and actually we worked a lot. The government agencies that we've had support from, federal and provincial, have been phenomenal, I have to say. And early on, through Lauren Taylor, we accessed the NRC and so forth. But then we ended up working with Industry Canada with the PEMD program, which was really phenomenal. Once we generated enough sales to qualify for the program, we were able to sort of tap into their expertise in terms of how do we take this product into these different markets.
And didn't you work, in fact, with the consulate directly?
We tapped into these trade commissioners, basically the trade commissioner service, where they were able to say, okay, you come to our embassy, we will do a reception, we will get the media involved, we will bring your local distributor, we'll have an event where we'll invite the leading doctors and so forth, or people who are interested in this technology and this product and this service, and we'll have an event. And we did that in several countries, and each time it helped to launch the product in that country.
Right. Oh, what a lot of work, a lot of travel for you. Traveling the world, you're constantly on the road. Thank goodness you have the Litebook. Another, and in fact, it brings me to a question about, you know, the jet lag and your expansion of I guess applications for the
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because we, as I said, when we first started, we looked at SAD, which was my own experience, the winter blues, and trying to address that. Then we looked at the jet lag issue, and that led us to the concept of shift work, which there's a lot of data on the concept of shift work, where they discovered that you can shift the body clock. So when you go to work at 11 o'clock at night, you think it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Right. And it addresses your sleep issues, and there's a lot of health concerns with shift work and so on.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing a lot of work, Larry, in research now, and I think you actually have an interesting way that you've approached partnering on the research. Can you help the audience understand how you've...
Well, again, one of the issues that we've confronted was that we had a technology that wasn't proven, and there was no data. And one of the first things that Dr. Lam said to me was, you need to get some data, because the scientists and the doctors, and to a lesser degree maybe the consumers, are going to beat you up if you don't. How do you know it works? You say it works, but how do I know it works? And, you know, so fair enough. So we then embarked on a clinical trial. We're actually doing a couple of them now, where we partnered with some Dr. Lam's group at UBC and McGill and Royal Ottawa Hospital and in Saskatoon, the SDRI, and also in Yale and a site in Europe, to do a multi-site trial. And one of the goals was to really give the validity of what we're doing, if you will, in the U.S. and certainly even worldwide, is the FDA. The FDA concept has been this sort of big brick wall for light therapy, and it's also the gold standard in terms of the United States in the market. So one of the goals is to be able to be the first company over the wall, if you will. And also we're supporting other research that's going on. There's a small trial that we're doing in the North Sea with the shift work that's underwritten by the Petroleum Institute in the UK and so forth.
Yes, you know, Larry, you know, you're innovating every day, which is you know, a task in itself, and I just was wondering what's important to ensure that the people around you stay focused on your vision. How do you manage that?
We have a very small group, but we have a very good group of people that all believe in the mission, and we spend a lot of time and a lot more time trying to focus that energy and the communication that goes on. And recently we became clients of a group out here called InnoCenter Alberta, which is sort of a business accelerator. So through the assistance of folks like InnoCenter, we've been very fortunate and able to stay focused, develop business plans, develop strategies and objectives, and sort of just laser in on them.
All right, so where would you say your business is now?
We're sort of in school, we're learning, we've gotten past the sort of the first formative hurdles. We've got a long ways to go in terms of being successful. We have yet to be profitable. That's our goal for this year, is to be profitable. And the next stage is to look at forming strategic alliances. We've got a lot of interesting opportunities now coming our way as people see this technology and see what we're doing. And we're trying to learn how to validate those and prioritize those in a way that we can really help to grow the company.
Okay, and where do you see your company in the next 5 years?
Good question. I think we'll see that we hope to continue to expand. We hope to become sort of the leading light therapy device company in the world. We want to lead the way to light and wellness. We believe that we've got the right technology, we've got the right partnerships, the right alliances, the right people involved in terms of the researchers, and we believe it's a process of educating the people, the consumers, the public, to understand that there's an issue involved here with light and well-being. That you know, without light there is no life.
What major challenges are you facing right now?
Right now we're facing challenges of being undercapitalized. We're facing challenges of being able to ramp up in terms of our manufacturing and distribution. Innovation, we're working on generations 2 and 3 of the product already. That kind of thing we're looking at. Also regulatory issues in terms of FDA. We're looking at IP issues in terms of patents issuing. We're looking at, you know, the concept of competition, and people are sort of realizing, wait a sec, this might be a good idea after all, so maybe we should do it too. Right. So, you know, competition is good. It keeps you focused, keeps you honest, keeps you on your toes. And so, you know, I'd say of those, there's probably half a dozen yet.
And I was just wondering, how do you decide on how you're going to continue to innovate? You've talked to me about that before, a bit about that.
Well, we know that I mean, as far as I'm concerned, once this product is in the market, we're on to the next product. I'm a big believer of Guy Kawasaki wrote a book called Rules for Revolutionaries, which I highly recommend. It's a short book, but he talks about the process of innovation. And one of the things he talks about is churn, baby, churn is one of the chapter headings. And And constantly, every 18 months, his advice was to be looking at having the next generation, the next iteration, the next improvement, because your customers will never expect you or want you to rest on your laurels. Even no matter how good your first iteration is, you can always improve it. The technology is improving, certainly. The LEDs are getting more efficient, they're getting brighter, they're getting more focused on the energy and the wavelengths and so on. And we take a lot of customer surveys. We ask our customers, what is working for you? What do you like about this product? What don't you like? What would you change? We talk to our dealers, our distributors, our reps. What works for you? What doesn't work? How can we make this better?
Right. If you knew then what you know now, what do you think you might have done differently?
I really had no concept of how much work was involved. That would really sort of surprise me as how it just eventually took over my life. I think we would have probably stayed a little more focused in terms of our market strategy, in terms of going to market just in North America as opposed to Europe. Although at the same time I can say that having planted the seeds there now, I feel like we've got some little fertilizer, we'll be able to grow those markets. But I think in terms of having a realistic expectation of how long it would take, I really had underestimated how long it would take. And I'm told now that this is actually progressing quite well and on a fairly good timeline. But I was under the misapprehension that it would be 6 months to a year before we had a product in the market. And that just doesn't happen.
Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. And I'd like to close off with a couple of questions that'll give us a little further insight into Larry's personality. Who's your hero?
I have a couple of heroes. One is my father, who was a real sort of he wasn't an inventor necessarily. My grandfather was, but he wasn't necessarily. But his people skills, his sense of the world, his sense of his place in the world, and his ability to, I guess, maybe motivate people and inspire people, even in small ways, was really sort of inspiring to me. I'm a big fan of the guy, Howard Schultz at Starbucks also, he wrote a book called Pour Your Heart Into It, which was the first book I read at the point when I was having this idea. And, when he was selling housewares and basically he went out to investors to raise money for the Starbucks idea, and people said, who's going to pay $3.50 for a cup of coffee when they can get one across the street for 50 cents? And shot him down, and he kept going. And it was inspiring to me because the same thing happened. Who's going to pay to get light in a box when you can get it from the sun for nothing? And that same with the bottled water concept. So I would say those two.
All right. And what do you admire most in people?
What I admire most in people is their belief in themselves.
All right. And what do you like least in people?
Prejudice, prejudging.
Okay. Based on your experience with the Litebook, what would you leave the audience today? What advice would you leave them, Larry?
Well, that's a good question. I would probably say that if you have an idea and you really believe it, and you believe it not up here but down here, and you really think that this is something that really can make a difference in someone else's life, not just your own, that you need to follow up on that.
Larry, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today, and it's been very insightful for all of us, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Do you believe that the patent procedure has protected your product effectively?
From the very beginning, we didn't rely on the concept of patents protecting us necessarily. We viewed it as insurance, and there's no guarantees that the patents ever will issue. We're pursuing them aggressively and going through the hoops at the U.S. Patent Office. It's been almost 4 years since we filed, and so we didn't rely on that in terms of protecting us. We relied on the innovation itself and our ability to improve on the innovation, first to market.
Larry, can you say something about the decision that you made to incorporate, and who owns the equity in the company now?
The decision to incorporate came almost immediately on the heels of the first time we lit up the LEDs, and we realized that this was it. And we incorporated a week or two after that. And initially I owned the lion's share, I guess you'd say, of the equity, and the other inventors and so forth, the guys from the base, also owned a piece of it. And then, of course, there was dilution that occurred over time with the initial rounds of financing locally, the angels and so forth. And we've raised about $2.5 million so far, and I own now less than a third of the company. which in the beginning, in your naive state, you think, wait a sec, that doesn't work for me. I should own more. But as someone said to me, you can own 100% of nothing or 10% of something. Take your pick. And so it's been a gradual dilution, and that's the way of the world, the way of business. And there's, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, obviously, capital is the father. So, unless I had won the lottery or something, I wouldn't, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. So there's a trade-off, but that's okay.
I'm a graduate student at the University of Calgary studying industrial design and business strategy. And writing my thesis, I was looking at a bunch of different models for getting products to the market. One of those models involves getting larger companies with the resources and the distribution and marketing and manufacturing capabilities in-house already developing other similar products. In this case, an example comes to mind like Medtronic in the United States, Mallet & Root, some of these larger medical developers. Did you consider collaborating with them earlier, or is there an IP issue there?
Well, we did, but we also felt that we would lose control very quickly. And I was concerned that it would just get commoditized and it would just be another product in their pipeline and just go on the shelf. And it was my baby, and I wasn't prepared to let that happen to it. I'd worked too hard and too long, as did many other people. So we made a collective decision to hang on to it, knowing that if we proved the product a little bit and proved the market a little bit, we'd be in a much stronger position to form a strategic alliance. That's certainly one of our goals now. And we've been in discussion with a lot of the major manufacturers, distributors in Europe and Asia also in terms of taking the product. But we felt that if we went to them too early and that we were just this tiny little speck, that it would get swallowed up, and we weren't prepared to sacrifice that or risk that.